Oh, okay, that worked that time. How's it going, everybody? We're live. It's a wrestling classic here, Justin, and I'm about to have Sean Mooney in here, and we're gonna have a quick conversation with Sean Mooney. It might not be as long as the Rikishi one because he is at an event and he's ducking out for us, so he can quickly have a conversation with us. But it's gonna be good, man. I know Backlash's kickoff show starts within an hour, so we'll definitely be done before that. Yeah, man. I hope you guys enjoy. It's just gonna be a casual conversation with the wrestling classic, Sean Mooney. We'll talk about his podcast and everything he's got going on, but I'm back into the wrestling world, and yeah, much more. Hope you guys enjoy. Let me see if he's in here, because if he's in here, we'll get this show on the road, you know what I mean? How's everybody doing today? Also, the Squared Circle DNA, the first episode of the podcast has dropped, so you can find it on iTunes, SoundCloud, thewrestlingclassic.com. It's already up, so check out that. But I'm going to get Sean Mooney in here, and we're going to have this conversation. We're going to talk about his podcast and everything else that's going on and his time with professional wrestling. I'm going to ask him your guys' questions and stuff, so here we
go. All right.
Hey, how's it going?
It's been a little crazy right now. I'm at an event right now, and I was scrambling to find a room that I could get in because that event is still going on upstairs. But here we are. We connected. So
I know,
awesome.
It's great. I appreciate you doing this. It actually means a lot. And it's good that we got it at the time we got it. And I know you're at an event, so I don't want to take too much of your time.
No
but
worries.
I thought we could have a quick chat. We'll talk about everything you're doing now, because I think it's super cool with the podcast and everything. So first of all, maybe let's start about that. Like, obviously you were with the WWF from, what was it, 1988 to 1993?
That's right.
How did you, were you a wrestling fan growing up?
Well, I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. It's not a big wrestling hub. We didn't get many shows back in the day. But, every once in a while we get it on TV, and I thought it was, awesome. But it was all part of growing up. I was a real big sports fan. Yeah. So, I followed everything. But we never really got a chance to see these guys up close. So the way I ended up getting into it is pretty crazy, because I went eventually, I graduated from college out in Arizona, and then I went back east. I got a chance to get a job with Major League Baseball Productions in New York City, because they had done a show out here called the Baseball Bunch. It's a kind of a crazy story how that all came together. But I did get the chance to go back there right out of school and work. Yeah. And this is all coming together in the last couple of days. This story I'm going to tell you is, so I worked for Major League Baseball Productions, and I started out as a producer, and then I wanted to be a talent as well. So we were a company where there were opportunities for me to get in front of a camera back then, and I took every chance I had. And I did a show called Light Moments in Sports with Joe Namath. And I was a producer, but I was also filling in, doing little spots when they needed people to do stories. And we did a show together called Light Moments in Sports. And I got a chance to go do a story out at the Monster Factory in New Jersey with Larry Sharp. And it was about wrestling and how people train to wrestle. And I went out there and did this kind of crazy, lighthearted, but, kind of giving people an idea of what people went through to become professional wrestlers. And the story goes that someone with the WWF, I think it was Vince, but I don't know if, maybe someone brought the story to him, but he saw it. And then they called me, because I knew somebody who had worked for that company who knew me. And they just called me and said, "Hey, Vince McMahon wants to meet you." And I'm like, "What?" So I went up there and auditioned, and a couple weeks later, they called me to give me the job. Now, full circle here. This is kind of interesting. This has just happened in the last few days. Is I just did an interview with Scott Levy. And I remember, I don't know why, we set this interview up. Everybody, of course, knows him as Raven. Yeah. But it just kept sticking in my head. I remember doing this story way back in. We're talking, 30 years ago, basically. And I kept thinking, like, Scotty the Body. I just remember that name for some reason. Yeah. And so one of the producers that works with me, he looked up that clip from Light Moments in Sports. In this feature that we did, I do an interview with these guys at the camp. Scott Levy was at that camp training, just getting started and working on his shtick. Yeah, no kidding. And here, I actually saw an interview with him. Yeah. Did you see it?
No, I did see, and I just saw I saw the video that you posted and the picture, and I'm like, oh my god, that's crazy. And the fact
you got to check it out. You got to check it out. It's on YouTube. We put it up on YouTube. It's on Twitter.
Did you guys figure that out while you guys were in the middle of the interview, or?
Well, yeah, because I had thought about it that morning, and I'm thinking, how many Scotty the Bodies are there? And I remember he kind of looked like him. It's been a while, and it just never put the two together. And so before we started recording, I said, Scott, I think that we have a connection. I said, I'm not going to mention it till we start recording. And he's like, all right, let's go. And so I laid it out for him, and he's like, oh my, he goes, I remember that. You'll hear it in the podcast when it comes out. But
definitely
I remembered that.
So how was so when you met Vince, like what was the process to actually get the job? Like, was it something you really wanted to do at the time, or was it an opportunity you just couldn't pass, or?
Well, I wanted to be on television for one thing. I really wanted to be a talent, but also I wanted to be in sports television. And so I was just looking for an opportunity, and it came along. I had followed, if you remember back then, we're talking 85, 86 in that area, 87, it was, WWF was blowing up. And I lived in New York City, and remember they had Rock and Wrestling, MTV was involved, Cyndi Lauper, all these guys that were mainstream people, these mainstream entertainers were getting involved. And so I knew all about it. So, and I really educated myself before I went up there. I had about 2 weeks to do it. And so by the time I got up there, I knew pretty much everything about the company. I knew all the superstars. But as far as, coming from that background and wrestling being, my total focus, it wasn't at all. I was just really wanting to get, into sports television, and this was a way to get in.
So, obviously, when you started, you did. I know you did a lot for Coliseum Video. I was actually watching a lot of that today.
Yeah.
Do you have any fun stories from the times through Coliseum Video? I posted like 3 clips from stuff that you did with Lord Alfred Hayes because they were just hilarious. How was it working with Lord Alfred Hayes and stuff?
Well, if you know my my background, you know how much what Lord Alfred meant to me, and Gorilla Monsoon, those guys that really took me under their wings and helped me in the business really early on. But Alfred and I, when we started doing Coliseum Videos, they didn't know what was going to really happen with it, because I think Coliseum had approached them, and they were doing other things, and with this is when people were really first discovering about the videotapes and VHS and and Blockbuster, these small. At the time, there were small little video stores, before the Blockbuster came along, but they were just starting to experiment with it. And they went to the World Wrestling Federation at the time, and they said, we've got an idea. We want to market your tapes. And so they're like, sure, we'll see how this goes. And at the time, I lived in Stamford. That's where, I was one of the talent that lived in Stamford. And Alfred was there too. So they said, well, let them host them. Yeah. So at the beginning, we were pretty much had free reign to do whatever we wanted with them. I mean, we just were able to go into a prop closet, and they'd say, well, this is a theme about, war or something or whatever it was. And we would put, find military hats or something and whatever, and just go out there and just put it together. And so we were pretty much able to do what we wanted. Now, once it blew up and they were selling thousands and thousands of these, then they got a little bit more, scripted. And so you'll see that kind of the progression is when we started out, it was like, they're just having fun. So, okay, now they're getting into more elaborate productions. So I enjoyed both, but Alfred and I had a blast doing them.
And then also you did Primtime Wrestling with one of my favorites, and a lot of people's favorites, Bobby the Brain Heenan. I saw a lot of episodes you did with him. How was it working with Bobby? Do you have any stories about Bobby Heenan?
Oh, God. Bobby was just, it was great because I was, a very young performer at the time. I mean, I was just coming into the WWF. I really hadn't done much of anything. And, those guys, and especially with the business, if they don't, I'm not saying don't like you, but if they don't have any interest in helping put you over, you're dead. And Bobby was just incredibly generous. If you look back at the stuff that we did, he was so quick on his feet and so just tremendous with any kind of improvisation you did. And I loved being, the straight guy. So whenever I got an opportunity to work with Bobby, we just had a really good time. And
did you ever have to hold your laughter when you were working with
him?
Yeah.
Well, one story, the one that everybody, a lot of the video people have seen is when we were, the first Raw, and we were out in front of the building, and Bobby keeps showing up in all these different costumes. Yeah. And, the way we did things back then, they didn't tell you what they'd give you a scenario and basically say he's trying to get in the building and they don't want him to get in, and go. And so he would show up, and I never saw him in costume before he came up to do the bits, like the one when he was dressed like the woman. And then when he came dressed as the Hasid with the hat on and the big long beard. And I remember on that one, we were out in front there, and he had this beard. You ever see those? They're just, I don't know what the material is. It's just nasty material, the fake beard. Yeah. And he kept, as he was trying to talk, if you look in the video, the stuff was getting in his mouth, and he was like choking on it. Yeah. And you'll see me almost lose it. That's when hilarious. I pulled the beard off, but if they wouldn't have had the camera on me, you would have seen me kind of break, because it was just so funny.
And you've also got to, obviously, throughout your time there, you interviewed a whole bunch of wrestlers. One of my favorites, obviously, is the one time you interviewed the Macho Man while he was the Macho King. Because Macho Man's my favorite wrestler of all time. But do you have any fun stories about other wrestlers you might have interviewed during that period of time, or something that's really memorable that you would share with the people?
Yeah. Well, I always tell the story about Andre at Madison Square Garden when, he had a few bottles of wine that night, I think. Yeah. But he was there with Bobby, and we do these interviews backstage, and he did like one big arm sweep, Hulk Hogan, I'm going to get you, and he knocked me right off the set. Right, I went flying off into the, they had the chairs and all the stuff off to the side, and that was pretty memorable, because he didn't even realize
he was doing that.
What he'd done. Well, because and you hear him, he kind of comes over, and they had the microphones. We didn't have the wireless microphones, so that was on the wire, and I was just laying over there, and you hear him come over and go, "You okay, boss?" So
that's awesome. Well, obviously with Andre and everything going on with him, everybody loves a good Andre story. So that was a cool treat for us right now. So basically, you left in 1993, then, right?
Yeah.
What was the reason that you left the WWF? Like, what made that? What made you make that decision?
Well, it was at a time when, prior to 93, everything was family focused.
Yeah.
And there was a lot going on at the time, and we kind of changed direction a little bit. And I really liked the idea that we were really appealing to children and family oriented. And it just kind of started to change, and the company was changing a bit. And I just wanted to do something new. A lot of people didn't realize, I was in my early 30s. I felt like I'd gotten all this experience. I had people offering me things and, to go off and try and do different things. And so I just decided it was, at the time, that's what I wanted to do. Now, looking back, I might think like, idiot, what the hell were you thinking? Yeah. But then, I was just young and pretty cocky, thinking that I could go off and I had a lot of fun doing these other things, but it was just where I was at the time. And a lot of people don't, Vince was convinced I was going to go work for the WCW. And I'm like, I told him, I'm like, no, I mean, if I'm going to work for somebody in professional wrestling, it's going to be you. And so, and then I went from there, and I ended up working at WWOR and became a news anchor and was in news for quite a while. And then went back into sports and worked for Fox Sports Arizona, and then went back into news. And the way this came about was, I had done a few appearances with the WWE, and people started contacting me to do shows and do some appearances. And then, I just kind of, that appearance with the 1000th episode of Raw.
Yeah, that's
put me back in touch with everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, like, when they asked me, I'm like, geez, why would anybody want me to, why do they want to see me, And I was just really blown away by the reaction. The next day I had, a couple thousand people were following me on Twitter and were say, hey, where have you been, and all this, and so that just kind of grew and grew. More and more people got in touch with me, and then about a year ago, Court Bauer with the MLW Radio Network contacted me and said, would you ever thought about doing a podcast? And I'm like, well, I don't know,
Had
maybe.
you listened to any podcasts before that? Like, were there any wrestling podcasts
a few.
you would have checked out?
Yeah, but I didn't really think that, like, what would I do? I mean, I wasn't a wrestling historian. And it just kind of came down to a situation where I said, well, if I can do this, I want to do it with somebody else who would, be fun doing it with. And so Hacksaw came in. I, contacted Hacksaw, and he did it with me for about 19 episodes. And then his schedule just got too crazy. So, then we just had he wanted to not do the podcast anymore. So I started doing all of these other guests every week. And it's kind of grown from there. And it's been really fun. Because if you listen to
initially, I do remember you starting with Hacksaw. When I first started listening, it was you and Hacksaw, and then I realized he kind of just disappeared. He wasn't on it no more, and then we started getting guests. So you've had a ton of guests. Can you name some of them? So the people that haven't checked with the podcast, it's called Primtime with Primtime Sean Mooney. Is it?
It's Primtime with Sean Mooney. Yeah, and you can get it.
You can find it on MLW, iTunes,
iTunes, whatever your those free platforms out there you can get. But we've had Road Warrior Animal, I've had Tony Schiavone was on, Bruce Pritchard's been on. I just did an episode with Hillbilly Jim. We're in our 47th episode. I mean, you pretty much find everybody that you would love to hear from, and I love to find people that you don't expect to hear from. I had Jim Johnston on talking about, the music he's done for the WWF, WWE. And it was just a great episode. And also another great one was with Harry Smith, David Boyd Smith's son. So it was just, a very unexpected conversation because he was very open about, his life growing up with the Hart family and not having his dad around and the relationship that they had, and then losing him at 17. And then as he's continued on, to have his own wrestling career. So my podcast isn't really what you'd ever expect, I think, from a shoot interview podcast. I mean, I really like to think of it as a conversation with these guys because many of them I spent a lot of time with.
Yeah.
It's like catching up. I do a lot of homework, but I don't prep them. I don't contact them or talk to them really before we do it because I don't want them prepared and I don't want to be going down a list of questions. That's not the way it works. I mean,
exactly.
I make sure that I'm really, up to date on who they are and where they've been and what they've done, but I just see where the conversation takes us, and that's really what happens.
And I actually listened to both those. I really like the Jim Johnston one because I think it was the first podcast I heard him on after he went his different ways with the WWE. But yeah, that's what I liked about yours too, because it is like more than a lot of the podcasts nowadays, the ones that are really popular. It's there's a formula to it where it's kind of, they have a conversation, they do the research stuff, and yours always sound like a conversation. It's also like you were a part of the industry, but at the same time, you come off as not sharing everything from your behalf, but letting them tell their stories, which is super cool, and you can relate to it because you understand the industry. Yeah, and that's, I think, you understand too that, I think that sometimes these podcasts, the hosts get lost in the fact that it's not about them. People are tuning in; they want to hear about these people. So I certainly steer them in different directions. Sometimes they say something that was almost in passing, and then you say, "Well, wait a minute." B. Brian Blair was on, and he talked about, that he was married to Mike McGurk, who was one of the WWF announcers. I remember it.
Ring announcer, and he made some passing comment about how he had, they had broken up. She had gone off with some other guy, and that he gotten an altercation with this guy, and then went to say goodbye to her, and then Leroy McGurk, her father, almost shot him. And he just kind of went on. I'm like, wait, whoa, what?
We're getting exclusive here, guys.
Yeah, he tells this story about how he was trying, when they were early on in their relationship, he's trying to, this is the second time he almost got, or the first time he almost got shot. But he said he's in the house, and Leroy McGurk did not see very well at all. And he said he's in the house, and he didn't, he was very protective of his daughter. And he comes out of the room with a gun, and he said he's got his back against the wall in the kitchen, and the guy walks by him because he didn't see very well. But so I really listen to catch things like that, because
and that's the thing, when you let people talk and you're not cutting them off with your own opinions and stuff. Sometimes you get to hear those stories because they'll bring them out because it's their platform to share them. And I think that's super cool, like that you got an exclusive like that. That's crazy. That you would even
that's say that. And every one of the podcasts, I mean, I don't care if you've heard these guys in other shoot interviews. You're gonna hear different stories, And it's a very different conversation that we have. I mean, and every one of them I always get done and go, wow, you know, I can't believe that I didn't know this about this guy.
Yeah.
You know, there's always something that comes out of it that's just crazy. I mean, we just did Lex Luger, and of course everybody knows Lex's story for the most part. They know about his you know, downhill spiral that he had, and the whole thing with the death of Elizabeth Hewlett, you know, Miss Elizabeth. But in our conversation, as we were talking, and he always talked about how, you know, he's, you know, of course he's found Christ, and that's his faith is very powerful in his life now. But he talks about how close his family is, but he never mentioned his ex or his kids. And I just was thinking, like, he never mentioned. I said, what happened with that relationship after? And it turns out that he has not been in contact with them for all that time.
Oh,
he
that's
has
great.
2 children, and he never, he says, and that's, you know, I realize it's consequences to your actions, and that's one of them. And he goes, I hope one day it's different, and I reach out to them whenever. But I was like, wow, that's just, you know, so there's things.
So you
like
must have
that
some sort of appeal where they feel safe to share this with you.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, you must have some sort of,
I don't know what it is, but it works. So I'm just enjoying it. I enjoy the conversation. I think people realize that I'm, you know, I'm like them. I feel like I want to be that person who's out there saying, what do I want to hear about, or what do I want to know about this guy? So that's what the
and how many of these guys have you talked to for the first time since, like, the last time you were in super involved in the wrestling business?
A vast majority of them. And, you know, like Scott Levy, before I put it together, I thought we'd never met. And
no, for sure.
A lot of these guys, we just share different experiences, but we were kind of all there, you know, at the same time. But most of them I haven't seen or talked to in decades. And that's another fun part about it, you know, comparing notes about stuff we went through. I hadn't talked to Tony Schiavone in a long time. I ran into him one time at the WWE a few years back, but we didn't really get a chance to talk. And to be able to compare the notes of stuff that was going on back then when I was there, because we never had those conversations.
And you guys were both there at the same time.
Yeah, and Craig DeGeorge was another person. Craig and I would, you know, he was there for a few months after I first got there, but we never really talked. And we had a great conversation. You should check that conversation out.
Well, I did not check
it was so much fun. Yeah, it was fun talking to him.
Yeah. Did WCW ever actually reach out to you when you left in 1993, though? Did they try to reach out to you?
Well, I had one conversation with Tony after he had already gone back down there, and he just, I think he was just kind of feeling me out just to see what I'd be interested in. I just told him, you know, I have other plans. And I said, if I wanted to do this, I'd stay. I would never have left the WWF. Yeah. So, you know, there's kind of people always thought I got fired or whatever. Vince and I were, you know, had bad falling. It wasn't like that at all. I actually sat in his office and just said, I think I want to go do this. And he's like, okay, you know, I get it. But I think he thought that I was going down to WCW. And when I became a news anchor at WWOR, the next day he sent me a telegram congratulating me, because, you know, it made the WWF, WWE look good, that here you had somebody who had worked for him. And I'm eternally grateful for the experience I got there, because I would have never been able to do anything else that I did beyond there if it wasn't for that. So I've never said anything bad about Vince. I've never had this, you know, horrible falling out or anything like that. So, you know. You
did mention earlier that you didn't like the way that it was shifting from, like, a very kid-friendly family entertainment type of situation. Did you watch during, like, the Monday Night Wars Attitude Era? Were you still watching during that time?
Oh, yeah. And to see, especially when it really heated up, and when you started seeing things with, like, DX coming in, and the emergence of The Rock and Stone Cold, and you saw that was a really interesting period of time, and it changed professional wrestling forever.
And it just seemed like a complete 360 from, like, the Rock and wrestling time to the Attitude. It's like a totally different. I just wondered if you were still interested. Do you watch the product today?
Yeah, I do. I have the network, you know, and I tune in and I watch a lot of it. I watch a lot of the old stuff.
No, for sure.
It's great. Oh, it's great for me for my research. You know, it's a big part of what I do. And it's fun to go back and watch some of the the promos and not just the matches, but some of the other stuff the guys did, because it reminds me of when I did those interviews with them and the stuff that that they did and what I thought was really great, and the guys that had a little more difficult time doing cutting promos, and so it's fun to go back and look at that stuff. Even people send me stuff of me all the time. I'm like, oh my God, how did they put me on TV back then? It was so bad,
Did you ever look back? Do you ever look back and kind of appreciate those guys cutting those promos and stuff, knowing how scripted it is today, in a sense? Because it is a lot more scripted and controlled. Where back then, through all the podcasts I've heard, including yours, there would be like, we got bullet points, and then we just went out there and we did our thing. Do you think it was better back then or better now?
Oh, I absolutely think it was better back then. And don't get me wrong when I say, I think that there's some tremendous talent with the WWE today. There really is. I wish some of these guys that were back in the 80s would have really been tremendous superstars. But back then, you really were given the opportunity to develop your character. Those guys really were able to have that creative freedom, so that when they went out there, when they cut promos, they were that guy. And they were really able, because I remember guys had different methods of doing things, but you'd see them, you could just see how they would put the stuff together. And they lived their gimmick every day. At least when they were on the road, they lived their gimmick 24/7 when they were, they rode in separate cars. They stayed in different, the hotels. They weren't allowed to, really hang out together. And they really were able to develop their characters. And also, if you certainly remember, that you were able to develop these storylines that would last months and months and months.
Yeah.
People were going out of their minds because they wanted some resolution. You never saw these guys really go at it in the ring. You had to go to a house show. You had to get the pay-per-view to see it happen. Mm-hmm. Today, and for whatever the reason with the product, they move it along much quicker. They script it more. And, I just think that that's something that's doesn't make it as great a product to me, as far as just watching it entertainment wise, because I think that these guys, if they let them go, because you talk like somebody like The Rock, who said when they finally just said, do what you feel. Yeah. That's when everything changed. And I think
it was better in the sense that the fans would kind of get a way to be able to choose who they want to root for through what the wrestlers were doing, rather than trying to choose through what they're being told to do, kind of, if that makes sense, but do you think in today's generation, a show, I know there was different incarnations of it. Obviously there was the Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan one and the 4-man panel one, but do you think a studio version show like Primetime Wrestling in a studio version way would work in today's atmosphere, mostly with the network?
Well, I think that you see examples of like that in a sense with Edge and Christian. Yeah, like those guys are, from what I hear and I've experienced, I did an episode with them. They have creative freedom.
And that show's great.
Yeah, I think in that format, maybe that if they really let some of these guys, because there are some really creative people with the WWE right now. And I think if they let them do shows like that, more of those shows, I think it could work.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying that that if you had two announcers, like you had Bobby and Gorilla, and they just worked because of that, that time, and it was just magic in a bottle with those two when they were together. But there's, they could do the same thing, I think, with a couple of the announcers, Corey and somebody else who's a superstar or something like that would work. And then let the guys come in and do bits, kind of like we used to do before. I really think it could work, but I think what happens is then it gets overproduced, and then that takes away from it.
I can kind of see that, because I always felt growing up when I was younger, like I all those type of shows and stuff used to give you more time to really get to know the characters and develop not the storylines necessarily, because they didn't really stupidly include the storylines too much. They talked about them, but it gave you more time to connect with the actual characters and the wrestlers themselves outside of the main shows that were on every week in the pay-per-views. And I think that's something that's kind of missing today, because you see them on Raw and SmackDown, and then after that it's kind of like you don't really see them anywhere else too much. So I thought that let me see what other questions we might have here, but I'm going to let you go soon because I know you had an event. I really do appreciate you coming on here.
My pleasure. In the meantime, I hope everybody will check out our YouTube channel, Primetime with Sean Mooney. We've got a lot of great stuff up there, and you can see that clip that I mentioned with Scott Levy. So if you got a chance, go to our YouTube page and check that out, because there's a lot of really fun stuff. And we've also broken up some of this stuff with the interviews, so you don't have to listen to the whole 2-hour episode, because most of them are. But we've broken them into clips, and you can hear that those clips about like Lex talking about his kids and that kind of thing if you go to the YouTube channel.
And so you're on YouTube, you're on iTunes. You can find it on MLW Network. Are you ever thinking about getting involved with any of the MLW stuff that they're doing now, since they're doing shows and stuff?
Yeah, but I'm a news anchor out here where I live, and I do a morning show, so it would be a little tougher for me to be involved.
Yeah,
I have been doing, I do some where I've gotten out to some of these shows, and also there's a DVD coming out that I've done with the WWE, and also I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this stuff. I got more WWE stuff coming up, and
well, that's awesome.
I mentioned my friends Edge and Christian, so I probably should leave it at that. But
no, you're probably gonna be
I
the Edge and Christian show, which is gonna be awesome.
And I'm telling you, I'm afraid to look at the script on this one, because they, like I said, they have creative freedom, and when I did that show with Gene, if you saw that, and I was like looking at the prompter going, are those words really in there? You guys want me to say that? I mean, it was so.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but I get to do just enough where it's really fun, and the podcast is a blast. Doing it once a week. So right now it's just all fitting into it fits into my life really well, and I'm having a blast doing the podcast. So, anybody's got any questions?
From a fan standpoint, for us that grew up watching wrestling since we're younger and stuff, it was super cool to see you back involved with wrestling. Like, a lot of people are excited that you're doing this podcast and stuff. And when I even mentioned that, hey, I might be able to do this live stream with Sean Mooney, there was a lot of people that got excited about it and wanted to make sure they were here for it. So I'm glad we got to do this. And I'm glad you're doing the podcast, because it is really entertaining. And once again, I've listened to a handful, and you do get different stories that you don't hear anywhere else, because it's less of a conversation of what happened when or what happened in that time. It's more of just a conversation. It's organic, and it's like catching up with people you probably haven't talked to in a long time, and you get that vibe. And when you catch up with people, you get those stories that you won't hear anywhere else. It's really cool.
And also, I mean, of course, professional wrestling is a huge part of their lives, but I love these episodes because I think they're very inspirational to a lot of people, because you learn about these guys' lives. Danny Davis, in one of the episodes, Danny Davis grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts. He was at like 12 or 13. He was a street fighter. That's how he made his living. I mean, because he was
did not know that.
From a very poor family, right? And this is somebody who came from really nothing. And I talk about his journey, where first of all, even getting a job with the WWF, which he did, and moved rings. That's what he did. He was put up rings and was part of a ring crew. Then to go from that and become a referee. Then not just become a referee, become a heel referee. Then go from there and become a superstar to appearing in main events. So these guys have incredible stories, and most of them are very, very they're just incredible people who've overcome incredible odds. You know what I'm talking about. This business is tough. Yeah, it is tough. You have to. You don't have just thick skin. You gotta have leather for skin, and be able to keep getting up over and over. Because how much rejection these guys face, and the ones that triumph. That like this interview I just did with Scott Levy, where he never thought he was good enough ever, and yet you look back. He had a pretty damn good career. He had a pretty damn impressive career, and went to all these different places. And just like you said, I knew there were times I should have kept my mouth shut. It wasn't me. I couldn't do it. But it just shows you how incredible these people are, and they reach these heights, and they're just like everybody else. They have the same stuff they've gone through. So no matter where you are, you can triumph. You can get through it. And these guys are classic examples, and that's why I love telling their stories. I really do.
If there's anyone out there that was interested in broadcasting just generally and wanted to get into the WWE, would you have any advice for them?
Well, boy,
Different time.
these days, yeah, it is different times. And I got an opportunity that just, I was very, very, at the same time, I worked my ass off before that. And I always tell people, you just got to keep plugging. And I have never told anybody I was the best looking. I was never had the best voice. I was never the most talented, but damn it, I never stopped. I just kept knocking. And that's the whole message you'll get from me, but a lot of these guys I interview, that's what made them successful. They just never gave up. They had the passion for it, and nobody was going to stop them. So I think that whatever you want to do, you've just got to just keep going, and eventually something will happen.
No, for sure. Now I guess we'll end it pretty soon. I guess I'll ask maybe I'm a huge fan of Macho Man Randy Savage. Do you have any Macho Man stories?
Yeah. Well,
I always love a good Macho Man story.
Yeah. This one is kind of tied into Vince too.
Yeah.
And Conrad Thompson talks about this story. He said it's one of his favorite interviews he ever saw. Well, to me, it wasn't one of my favorites, but I'll tell the story anyway. It was when he was the Macho King, and I can't even remember what happened in the match, but he was devastated. It was, and he comes back stage, and we're going to do this live interview, and Vince is in the room with me, and I said, like I said, we didn't really script things back then, and I said, how long you want to go with this? He said, we'll let you know. Just go. Let Randy do. Yeah. He goes, I'll tell you when to wrap. I'm like, okay. So we go, and Randy goes off on this, emotional, tortured, and he's, just going on and on and on, and he's looking at the camera. It's just dramatic, and I'm thinking that's a good point. And Vince doesn't say anything, and he keeps going. Finally, Randy gets down on his knees, and he's grabbing me, and and I look over at Vince, and Vince is wrapping his arms around his body, and I'm thinking, well, he's want me to hug him? What does that mean? I don't know what he wants me to do. Yeah. And so finally, Randy just doesn't say anything, and so I wrap it up, and we're clear. And Vince is like, "What the hell were you doing?" I'm like, "What? He says, "I told you to rap." I said, "When did you tell me to rap?" He goes, "I was going like." I'm like, Vince, I have seen, this. I've seen wrap it on, I have never seen this. Yeah. And that was my signal to rap. But anyway, Randy's like, "It's okay, brother. I think it went off well anyway." Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, that was. Was he super intense in promos and just totally you could turn it off when it was done? Is that how it worked? No, Randy was pretty much Randy, but he was, the consummate professional. I mean, he was always prepared, and we had a little bit of a run-in early on, not where it was like this physical thing, but something had happened, and I went and told him. I said, as an announcer, you can't do that, and you got to let me know. And I thought for sure I'm going to get dope slapped or something, and he went, "Oh, see your point, brother." Sounded like Hulk Hogan there, but he said he instead he was like, "Okay," and from that point on, we were cool after that, and we got to be very close. And awesome. But it took a long time, but I always admired about him the fact that he was always ready and always prepared, and he was just he with his interviews spot on, and he always would say it was something that his father taught him, that if you didn't give 100%, you were stealing from people, and they paid money to come and see you, and you better deliver. And that was always his philosophy, and every time I ever worked with him, that's all I ever saw. That's my story of Randy, because he was always that way whenever I worked with him.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Who was your favorite promo person, personally? Not even just for interviewing, just watching. Who was your favorite promo person? Because I'm a character storyline guy, and I love promos and stuff, so I want to know who your favorite promo person was.
There was a lot of great ones. But I have to say the most fun, the ones that I enjoyed the most, the ones I liked doing was Kurt Hennig. Because he was just he was really good at what he did. Yeah. But he was also he was just so damn funny. I mean, he was one of the funniest guys, and he would always do little. He was known as this tremendous ribber. He didn't ever do anything really a bad rib to me, but he would do stuff like where he'd come in the interview room and Mooney, whatever, and during the interview, and then he'd leave, and then 2 hours later I'd find a wad of gum on my jacket, you know, that you couldn't see it. But when he put his arm on me, he, you know, because he was always chewing the gum.
Pat you on the back,
like
put the gum back there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was,
were you ever ribbed really bad by anybody? Is there a rib story that you have?
No, well, just, you know, little stupid things. But I learned really early on when you know, Gorilla and Alfred kind of gave me my, you know, smartened me up, and they were saying, you know, you never fall asleep on a plane, you never take your shoes off, you know, and you're not going to be one of them, so don't try and pretend you are, you know, don't ever think when they invite you back to their room, don't go. And so I never really put myself in a position where I could do that. And I wasn't on the road as much as those guys were. I would see them at TV tapings, and we would be, you know, in and out. So, you know, we used to do a lot of stuff back at the studio, but besides that, you know, that was about it. I was pretty fortunate. No major rips.
So they let you know beforehand, which is good on them.
Yeah, no, they smartened me up early on. So, yeah.
Well, I really, really appreciate your time. Once again, like, guys, you can find it Primetime with Sean Mooney on MLW Network, iTunes, and go check out the YouTube channel. If you want to hear some of the stories we kind of talked about on here, and just like the snippets of it, then you can find them on the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe, though. Don't just go there and watch them, because everything helps all the time. Really appreciate your time. Is there anything you want to say before I let you go? Because I know you had an event and you're in some random room. I don't want to keep you there forever.
I got to get back upstairs. Yeah, but I just want to thank everybody. Really, I've just been blown away by the WWE fans. They're the most loyal, and just wrestling fans. You know, I've covered everything. NFL, I've covered Major League Baseball, the NBA, and no fans come close. And it took me a while to understand why they were so passionate and why they, you know, love talking to me, or because they love that period. The 80s and the 90s was just a special time, and I feel like I look at it like I was on one of their favorite TV shows, and I was one of the players. I was one of the small part players, but I was part of that show, and they loved it. So when they people said to me, you know, you were one of the voices of my childhood. God, that just rocks me, because I just think that's so awesome, and it makes me just appreciate it. You know, because it takes them back to their childhood. And it really does. Someone in
here even said the moment they heard your voice, they felt like they were 13 years old again. Right, and that's awesome. You know?
And that was great time. I mean, like, you think about how much fun was that period of time that we got to be a part of, you know, the whole rise of Hulkamania and Randy, and, you know, we could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
Legion of Doom, Demolition, those guys. And I got to play with them. I got to be there and know them, you know? So I get it. And I just want to thank everybody. Really, it's been so much fun. It like took me back to one of the greatest times of my life, and that's I thank them for that. So I hope
we appreciate you. We're happy you're back. We're happy you're involved again. They go super cool to see at Raw 1000. I remember watching them, like, holy smokes, it's Sean Mooney, because I grew up with a brother that was an 80s child and watched it in that time. So I had all the magazines and the VHS tapes and the Coliseum video. So I knew, and it was super cool. And the fact that you're doing the podcast is great, because you have the different perspective than everyone else, because you were there during that time with a lot of these guys that some of the younger people doing podcasts, like Stone Cold, can have a conversation with Brian B. Blair, and it won't be like the same period of time, because it was a different period of time. So it's cool.
Yeah, and the thing is, you know, I talk to so many of these guys now, and I was no different. That, you know, when you're working and you're focused and you're trying to, you know, get better, and you don't stop and just look around and go, wow, look what I'm doing. And they say now they look back and now they realize what an incredible period of our lives that was. And I do too. And it's just so much fun now to relive it with them and talk about these stories. And now people get to hear all this, you know, and it's just great. I love it. So please listen. And then also I'm going to be a part of the event taking place in Chicago in September. Yeah.
All-in event.
Yes, and there's a lot of us that are going to be there, and they're going to have a lot of the podcasts there, and so I hope that everybody catches that too. There'll be, you know, Conrad and them are putting this all out, and it's going to be a great event. But there's other stuff going on, so thank you so much for following me. Now you can contact me on Twitter at Sean Mooney Who, or at Primetime Mooney, and we also have a website, primetimemooney.com. That's, you can get all the connections. But I love hearing from you guys, and so. Thank you.
Well, hopefully we can do this again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's cool. And it was great talking to you. It's cool for me too. I try to act all normal and cool, but it's super cool for me too. I know I got to meet you at Wally Mania, but I was in a different state of mind.
Yeah,
but,
we all were that night, and we didn't even have
were.
to drink, if you remember.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
It's like, woo.
That's true. But it was a pleasure meeting you that day. It was a pleasure doing this. I really appreciate it. We'll definitely do this again. And yeah, I'll make sure everyone checks out your stuff, and I'll keep in touch to make sure I know what's going on to let everybody know. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was fun. I'm going to definitely. Someone said something about me. I don't know, but I definitely. Yeah, I was in a different state of mind at Wally Mania. That's what you're talking about, AJ. I know it. Hope you guys enjoyed that. That was. I start sweating when I do these things because I get nervous, but I'm trying to act all cool and stuff. Like, I don't know, maybe it's hot in my room, but that was a blast. It was a pleasure for me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope I got to ask some of your questions. I tried. And I'm going to put this up on YouTube just like the Rikishi one, so definitely check it out. And yeah, man, I hope you guys enjoyed it, man. And I'll put all the Sean Mooney stuff on the YouTube channel so you guys can check out his podcast, his YouTube channel, everything else. And what drugs did you do, Sean Mooney? And I'm going to watch Backlash now, but I also want to quickly plug myself. Check out the Squared Circle DNA podcast. It's now up on iTunes, SoundCloud, and thewrestlingclassic.com. Just type in Squared Circle DNA. It's me and my boy Danny B. This is just an introduction. Next week, we're going to be talking about when we thought the Attitude Era started. What moment in professional wrestling did we think the Attitude Era started? Was it the Stone Cold Austin 316 promo? Was it the Montreal Screwjob? Was it the formation of DX? When do we actually think the Attitude got brought into the WWF? Not the Monday Night Wars. We know when that started. That started with NWO, let's say, for example, and Nitro being a show. But when did the Attitude Era start? So check it out next week. I'm going to be putting a post on my page where I say... where I ask you guys when you think the Attitude Era started. But yeah, I just want you guys to do that. So Squared Circle DNA, go on iTunes, give it a rating, listen to it. The first episode's kind of all over the place, but we're going to get it together as we keep moving forward. I might be doing some stuff on Twitch. Lady Kane's all about that right now. The Wrestling Classic shop's going to be open more, but I hope you guys enjoyed that interview with Sean Mooney. Sometimes I talk so fast and so much that it hurts myself. But hope you guys like that interview with Sean Mooney, and I'll put it on YouTube and check out the podcast and check out Sean Mooney's podcast, and we'll see who I can try to get next for one of these live streams. So we've got Sean Mooney and we've got Rikishi. Let me know who you guys want to see next. I don't have any interview skills. I'm trying. I'm learning as I go. But we're gonna keep trying to do these, and if you guys really enjoyed them, then more people will be wanting to do it because I see that you guys enjoy it. Don't worry, Mitch Mulligan will be doing some shit too. Too sweet, you guys, even though I guess that's getting played out to some people. But anyways, get Jericho. I wish I could get Jericho. Imagine that conversation. Maybe I can get Jericho to talk about the Cruise of Jericho. That'd be insane. Don't worry, Angel. I'm saving it, and I'm going to be putting it on YouTube. Anyways, pleasure speaking to you guys all. I want to watch Backlash just as much as you guys do. And it's sunny out here. I don't know what to do, guys. But enjoy the rest of you guys' day. And we'll talk to you all later. Ooh, yeah. Wrestling Classic shirts coming to you pretty soon on the new Wrestling Classic store. Stay tuned. Squared Circle DNA. It's in your veins, man. Talk to you guys all later.